You're listening to the Creepcast on DownrightCreepy.com. Here's your creepy hosts.
Hey everybody, Casey Canton here for another Creepcast on DownrightCreepy.com, along with my co-host JD. Creepcast on Twitter, at Downright Creepy, Instagram, Facebook, all those places. You got a question for us, ask us. We'll talk about it on the show, and each month we'll give away a t-shirt to anyone that has asked a question that we actually use on the show. But let's get into today's topic.
And there's got to be some questions, right?
There's got to be questions.
It's so interesting. There's got to be questions.
I feel like once we build up the episodes, the questions will flow in. People got to get used to the show.
Flowing in like wine.
That's right. On today's show, we're going to discuss Zak Bagan's Haunted Museum in Las Vegas. I had the opportunity to check it out back in March. So I want to talk about some of the creepiest items you'll encounter. But first, Halloween is upon us, JD. Ghosttober is almost here. Of course, Ghosttober is the programming from the Travel Channel and Discovery Plus, along with a bunch of stuff thrown in from the Food Network. But I care about Travel Channel Discovery Plus the most. I'm not trying to downgrade the other content, but I wanted to highlight some of the cool programming coming to us. And, of course, this has really become, it's very interesting that Travel Channel and Discovery Plus, especially Travel Channel, have really become a place for paranormal shows, which is interesting because if you think about it, like, they are traveling around the country and the world. So they are exploring, but it's just always been intriguing to me that it became that platform.
I think they really found their
niche for
their niche, absolutely, and they found something that people will tune into and that the ratings will stay up for. And
I'm really excited about the programming. I'm going to give you a little bit of kind of highlights as to what's coming. So let's just run down the list a little bit of the programming that they have in store for us. Again, I love the paranormal content. It doesn't matter if it's retelling an old story with different hosts. I think it almost becomes the personalities telling the stories as much as it is the stories nowadays. So some of the highlights, and some of these shows have been on already, but they're starting up again or they're specials, including Conjuring Kesha. We caught her panel at San Diego Comic-Con. She had some really interesting things to say about the show, her guest host, and some of the experiences they had, and found it to be actually really fascinating. So she's going to have some extra bonus content that you're going to be able to check out. So Conjuring Kesha. Ghost Adventures, Goldfield Hotel and Cecil Hotel. They're also going to have their new season premiere for Ghost Adventures on September 15th. Can't wait for that.
Cecil Hotel, that's the one in L.A., correct?
Yes.
On Skid Row.
Yes. The one that you briefly mentioned before.
Where's the Goldfield Hotel?
I'm not 100% sure, but I know when they started the show, they did a lot of stuff on the West Coast in Vegas because they're based out of there. And New Mexico and that kind of thing, and California. So I'm not 100% sure. I also feel like they've done it before. There's been like 24 seasons of Ghost Adventures now.
Wow.
And several iterations of Ghost Hunters and different networks and whatnot. So
it's a phenomenon for sure.
Yeah. They also have a special called The Devil's Den that will be out from Ghost Adventures. That's one specific special, not just an episode of the regular show, September 29th. There's also documentaries that Travel Channel has put out recently called Shock Docs, and they focus on kind of paranormal stories for an hour or two. This one's called The Curse of Robert the Doll. It comes out September 30th. I remember hearing about Robert the Doll when I was in college. 20 years ago, right? Someone was selling a haunted painting of him called Robert the Doll on eBay. And that was my first introduction to it, not even knowing it was an actual doll, but it was a painting of it, and it was supposed to be haunted. It went for a lot of money, too, if I recall.
I've not heard of Robert the Doll, so I'm going to have to check that out and see what's going on there.
Yeah, look at that. You see that doll up there? I've showed you this, right?
Yes.
William the Haunted Doll?
Okay.
That I got in college?
No.
No, you haven't seen that?
You never told. Well, I've seen it, but you never told me about that.
I'll tell you that after the show. William the Haunted Doll. Maybe we'll do an episode on it.
Awesome.
Ghost Hunters. New season of Ghost Hunter kicks off. The OGs, October 1st. Gosh, I remember watching Ghost Hunters. Really, what got basically the paranormal television series kicked off, like as a series, where week to week they were going to go investigate things. Like that's the first thing I remember. when this phenomenon started. They're kind of the OGs of all this.
Actually, the Brothers Grimm would be the OGs.
Well, I'm talking about paranormal, ghost hunting, adventures on TV, sure,
yeah.
but not the fairy tale. Yeah. But anyway, Ghost Hunters, new season kicks off October 1st. We had those guys on the show last year. Might try and get them on again, along with Jack Osborne, who has a new special coming out called Haunted Homecoming on October 2nd. I recently watched Jack's new special. It was called Night of Terror, UFO. He actually has Jason Mewes from Jay and Silent Bob fame, and Jamie Kennedy from Scream. Obviously, they've both done more things than that, but I think that's what you'll remember them by. And they're in the UFO special. They're going to Skinwalker Ranch, which you're probably familiar with, or at least have heard of. And it's kind of this massive set of land called Skinwalker Ranch that was. It's a phenomenon of odd things and occurrences, lights that appear in the mountains and in the sky that are unexplained. Actual Skinwalker itself is kind of a hybrid wolf, kind of like alien, sometimes people say. It's a cryptid, but it's at this ranch specifically. And so they go to investigate. I've seen documentaries on it. It is very weird, and it's very protected. So whenever someone goes on site to investigate, it's surprising to me because the documentary series on Netflix shows it with very high security, and I've seen enough now about it that you kind of have one end of the spectrum to the other in terms of how people approach the show and the tone, the way they put it together. That one was supposed to be documentary, and it felt scripted almost at some point. Like the owner of the land almost felt like evil boss guy, like corporate guy in a suit that was doing Zoom calls.
Okay.
It felt scripted almost. It was supposed to be real. Whereas Jack's version of it, it's like him and his buddies who are kind of skeptical of stuff but think something might be there. So it's like you and I would go with Jack Osborne to Skinwalker Ranch to investigate. And they had an expert with them too. So when they were at night looking at the sky through night vision, they'd look at it and they'd see a light. Well, there's satellites because you're out in the middle of darkness, like rural country, right? You're in a desert. There's no lights around. So the sky is wonderful, probably like you have in Troy, where you can actually see the stars.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamie Kennedy's looking through the night scope, and he's like, "What's that?" And the UFO expert, who was like a former CIA or FBI guy, he's like, "That's just a satellite." And he's like, "I don't think so." Like he wasn't believing anything. He's like, "See how it goes in a straight line? It's not like kind of zagging." And he's like, "That would make me think it's a satellite and not a UFO."
Mm-hmm.
And Jamie Kennedy was having none of it. He's like, he was trying to have fun and see something, and every time he thought he did, this guy would be like, "Nah,
Just shoot it down.
He gets so pissed off.
Well,
He was in disbelief. So,
my thing with Jack Osborne,
oh boy, here we go. He's going to be on the show.
yeah, he's a good guy, but so he is looking for the paranormal, right?
He does, yeah. He typically does paranormal. This was the first time he ever did something where it was like a UFO.
So he's looking
Search.
for the macabre. He's looking for
Unusual
events.
happenings.
But hasn't he reached the pinnacle? I mean, when your dad bites the head off of a bat,
But he wasn't a lot. He wasn't.
isn't that
he
the
wasn't
pinnacle?
there.
Like, there's nowhere else to go after that.
Yeah. Well, so here's side tangent. We'll keep moving on because I know we got to keep going. So yes, I agree with you on that. He did have
Thanks.
his mom and dad. So he had Ozzy and Sharon on a show, and it was him watching paranormal clips that he curated. And then he would basically like ask them, do you think this is fake? Or is it real? Can you explain it? And it was Ozzy and Sharon reacting to these clips. And sometimes Ozzy would just give the funniest reactions to stuff.
That would be hilarious to watch.
So you should check that out. I forget the name of it, but obviously if you look that up on YouTube or Discovery or Travel, you'll find it. But I also think it's like really cool that he got to do something like that with his dad.
I think so. Absolutely.
Especially, Ozzy's getting a little older. He was at Comic-Con signing stuff, and I missed it. I kicked myself for not getting there. But anyway, check that out. His special called Haunted Homecoming and then also Night of Terror UFO. Then we round out Ghosttober with Ghost Brothers Lights Out on October 7th. Eli Roth has a new series called Urban Legend on October 28th. And an insane show by name alone called My Possessed Pets. So I find that to be...
My Possessed Pets.
I get the concept of it without even knowing the synopsis. Pets are sensitive to things, right? Like they might sit in a corner and bark at it, and you're like, "What the hell are you barking at?" Oh, it's a ghost. I didn't see it. They are. So I get it, but to make a TV series out of it, not like a one episode thing wrapped around a paranormal show,
Might be a stretch.
Could be a stretch.
We'll see what happens.
But we'll see. And then Halloween Night, the Haunted Museum 3 Ring Inferno from Zak Bagans. The Haunted Museum 3 Ring Inferno with Zak Bagans to round out the programming on Halloween Night. It's probably going to be, I would guess it's a live show. It didn't specify, I don't believe. But they do a lot of live stuff on Halloween Night, which is intriguing. Could also be interesting because, during these investigations, you don't always find things. And it might be a 2 or 3 hour live stream. So we'll see. It might be pre-recorded. The cool thing is it's at his museum. So you can kind of control the elements that you're investigating. And I think that's actually a perfect segue into what I'm going to discuss today, which is my trip to Zak Bagan's Haunted Museum in Las Vegas.
I'm excited about this. Excited to hear about all your observations and what you thought of it.
And there's a few things here. I mean, everything I talk about, I think horror fans or fans of true crime or paranormal, you probably have heard of in some way, shape, or form. But I want to give you a little bit of background on this before we jump into it. It is in Vegas, opened in 2016. You can check out more information at thehauntedmuseum.com. It's 11,000 square foot property. It was built in 1938, and the family that originally owned the mansion had many family members that actually passed away on the property, around the 1970s. There was also claims of some dark rituals that would happen in the home's basement. There's 30 rooms throughout the haunted house that's curated with macabre items, haunted things, serial killers, just all kinds of stuff.
There are serial killers?
Well, not actual ones, but relics and artifacts from them.
So they're taking it to an extreme.
Yeah. But yeah, there's some movie memorabilia and that kind of stuff. So they have staff members there that have claimed to have things happen to them. They've witnessed things because the interesting thing about this is it's a paranormal investigator that owns the museum. So at all times when you go in, the guides tell you they're constantly setting up cameras, recording devices around the museum to investigate it. So it's basically being under investigation 24 hours a day that they can review and then possibly use as footage. So that's why I thought it was interesting they had a Halloween special. Maybe it's compiled clips of things that have happened throughout the year. But the other thing about it is you have a lot of people that come in here and they've fainted. They've had nosebleeds. They've had just uneasy feelings, and they've had people have to get medical assistance.
Do you think that is
psychological?
Psychological part because you're seeing so many strange and macabre and weird things, or do you think there's something actually going on there?
I personally think it could be a mixture of both. I think there's definitely a psychological thing that happens to you when you're there. I felt uneasy at moments, and here's another thing we should preface this with. I was flying there for a business thing for work. I dipped into this before I went. I hadn't eaten yet. And I went to this thing without eating. It was like 2 p.m. at that point. So I already felt like I was a little bit queasy to begin with. But when you go in, you do get a sense of uneasiness. And I mentioned this in our previous podcast, kind of talking about true crime stuff. I think it comes down to the fact that you're seeing things you don't feel like you should be looking at. Real things like serial killers that have actually hurt people and killed people in horrific ways versus a haunted doll that's more like lore and paranormal that you have to either believe in or not. Whereas the serial killer stuff, you don't have to believe in. It happened. Right. And you're seeing things that make you uneasy. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think some is psychological in that sense, that you're already feeling a sense of sadness when you go in, and that could be compounded because in paranormal and psychology and whatnot, your feelings and your body can feed on negative energy. And if things are haunted, they might feed on that, right? So it might enhance that feeling. That's a general idea, at least. So I think that the mixture of things they have there could make your mind start to play tricks on you a little bit, or at least make you more susceptible to feeling paranormal type of things. That's my 2 cents on it.
Do you want my 2 cents?
I do, but I'm scared.
No, I'm. In all honesty, I'm not a big. I'm not a big believer in the
Yeah, yeah.
paranormal. I have had one. I did have one experience which I thought was weird.
Yeah.
Real briefly, I was waking up from a nap and I sat up and I thought I saw a specter walk across my room. Legitimately, I thought
Like
that
shadow figure or
no, it was like
different?
a white squiggly substance of some kind.
Interesting.
And then it just kind of faded away. But I was just waking up, so who knows? But otherwise, I've had no paranormal experiences. But I don't go out and seek them either. And I know some of these places, like you're talking
There's
about,
tours too
are
that you
really
can go on.
susceptible to those kinds of things. So I'm not going to rule it out. But I think I'm kind of more on the conservative point of view on this particular subject.
Well, I think that's good to have two differing viewpoints on the podcast in that sense. I have experienced paranormal things. I grew up in a house that was a 100-year-old house. We renovated a piece of it. We added rooms to it. And in one room when we were adding to it, it took forever. And it was just kind of gutted. So it was just bare bones. And I would go in and hang my Nerf basketball in there because I could play and not break anything when I was a kid. I had an old radio that you really had to push hard on the radio to get to FM, from tape player to FM, and it just popped one day and turned on. And there's no way that thing would have slipped over. It was blaring when it came on. It freaked me the hell out. Turned it off, left the room. Same place. We had weighted windows. That's how old they were. Counterweights in the windows. And we had them, no air conditioning, so we opened them all up pretty often. And it was going to rain one day, and nobody was home. And we came home and all the windows were shut, every one of them.
Oh, wow.
I found out later on, as I got a little older, there was a woman that was maybe in her 90s that died at the kitchen table in that house before we had bought it, previous owner, before my grandparents had bought it. So there was always this thing with my uncle that Nellie was a ghost that was in there because she was the old lady that died, and that she was the one doing that stuff, which freaked me the hell out as a kid.
So you often see that where a ghost will like turn a radio on or something,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's something that happens in movies a lot.
Energy and poltergeist type material.
So why do you think that happens? Do you think that they just like FM radio?
No.
Or do you think it's something to do with, like you said, energy and,
I think it's
where they get so upset or something that it just kind of radiates and that's what happens?
I don't even think it's that they're upset per se. I think they might be, but I think it's a way for them, because the theory is they're just trying to be heard and seen in any way through energy, and that is maybe a way because it's a frequency and electronics that they're able to say like, hey, I'm here, or push something off a shelf, and they're trying to use that energy to do that, to say like, hey, I'm here, whether it's good or bad. I mean, that's discussion. I don't know. That's the theory, at least, that people say.
It's just weird because I've spent my entire life trying not to be seen.
Yeah, I hear that. Introverted.
Yeah.
Introverted.
Now I'm on TikTok, so whatever.
The only other thing, and then I'll dive into this, is that when I was a kid, we had, same house, by the way, we saw a mouse in the living room, like behind the couch, and it kind of ran out and scared my mom and I. And I vividly remember this. It's so weird. I've talked about it on another podcast before. I saw the mouse. I screamed because I was 6 or whatever, 7 maybe. And I can't explain it. It was like out of body experience. I screamed, and for a moment, I don't know how to explain the vision of it, but I saw myself in front of me, like copy of myself screaming. There wasn't a mirror there. There wasn't anything. It was almost like a duplication of myself in front of me that I was seeing, but not from my own eyes. It was like out of body. I've never experienced anything like that ever before.
That's
I can't explain what that was, and all these years later, it was a split second. I still remember it happening because it was so unique, and I don't know. I can't explain it.
That
Same
reminds
house,
me of
bizarre.
one thing. Can I mention something real quick?
Yeah. Yep.
My wife grew up in Lake Elsinore, California.
Okay. I didn't know that.
And while she was growing up, think about the time frame, the Night Stalker was murdering people in that area.
How old was she, do you think?
Roughly. She was 11 or 12
Yeah, that makes
when
sense.
that was occurring.
That's terrifying, dude.
And I mean, literally right around her area, people were. So every night, her dad would move like a dresser in front of the front door and make sure all the windows were locked and everything, right? And she has said that during that time she had some vivid, but it was probably from stress, right? I mean, just kind of things where she would see things or whatever. So, I don't know. It's hard to say. Is it real? Is it our minds playing tricks on us because of extreme stress or an extreme situation? It's tough to say. I don't know.
Just a fascinating,
and we'll never know.
Psychology,
right?
Psyche thing. Anyway, I think that's all good preface and context before we go into this haunted museum discussion of experiences we might have had and how things affect us in different ways, because I certainly felt uneasy when I was in here. It's just a heavy place to walk through, and it's a 2-hour guided tour. You have to sign up for time slots. It's a little pricey, but I think it's worth it. It's $48. It's a 2-hour experience. There's 30 rooms. There's a lot of stuff to kind of take in and see. And while it is guided, you can still walk around the rooms at your own will and kind of take in things, and they'll give you time in each room to look at it. So I wanted to just highlight, though, 5 of the kind of most haunted objects or things that I thought were the most interesting from the museum, because there's so much to look at, and I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but a lot of it's, at this point, probably a little more common knowledge. It's been open for a while. So I want to start with Peggy the doll. We just talked about Robert the doll, right? Peggy the doll is in a glass case in a room, in kind of a wood-structured glass case. You walk around it in a U shape, and before you go in the room, they give you a little bit of context to it. And again, psychological buildup, I don't know. But they give you a little bit of context to say that Peggy's haunted and bad things have happened when people look her directly in the eye. And if you don't leave the room without saying goodbye. So it's almost like open a portal, closing a portal type of thing on a spirit board. They tell you and suggest that you say hi to Peggy when you walk in, and when you leave, you say goodbye, Peggy. And you can say something to her while you're in there, but they're like, it's at your own discretion. You look her directly in the eyes, because that's when bad things have happened and people get in trances or they feel emotional afterwards, and even to the point where people have had bad luck and gotten car crashes and stuff like that when they left. So in my mind, I'm already I'm flying back home. What if the plane crashes? Then you get in the plane and you start thinking about it. So it gets embedded in your head, even though it's probably not going to happen. You still start to think bad things. So I think it's an interesting effect that it has on you, even if it's not real or is real.
Why do you think dolls are such the subject of paranormal activity?
Yeah.
Is it the look? Is it because they never close their eyes? Is it because they're always staring at you? It's just very strange.
I don't know, because it's always the attachment to dolls, right? There's always a spiritual attachment to dolls. Is it because we think they're more lifelike and human? Maybe there's something there that we see them and feel something out of them, or that's why they do attach to them, because they're human and they want to be human again, human form. I don't know. It's an interesting question. But yeah, you're supposed to go in and say goodbye and hello to it when you go in there. It has caused anxiety in people. There's been a heart attack. There's been headaches, all these types of things that have been experienced after they've left the room. Not often, but it's happened. But she has her very own room, and there's a spirit box linked up to it. Guests can interact with her if you want to. I did not. It creeped me out enough that maybe 2 rooms creeped me out the most. This was one of them, and it shouldn't have. It's a pretty innocent-looking doll, but it's all about the story and lore that kind of pulls you in. And you're like, oh, I don't want that to happen just in case.
Now, when you say interact, what do you mean?
You don't pick it up or anything. It's behind a glass, but it's speaking to it and asking it questions to see if it might answer you and that kind of thing. So I've seen some clips of people going in there from vlogs. You're not allowed to record or take photos in there unless you have permission, or Entertainment Tonight or somebody goes in. And there was a guy that was kind of hokey about it and didn't really believe in it much. And he got in there and he left. He started crying when he left the room, and it seemed legit. He goes, I'm just overwhelmed. I don't know what is happening. I feel hot, real hot. So I don't know, man. Something affected that guy, and apparently others.
She must have transferred her cycle to him.
I don't know what happened, man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I don't know.
You got all hot and started crying.
Flashes.
Oh boy.
Moving on, we got Ed Gein's Cauldron. Everyone knows who Ed Gein is, I'm sure. His Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Norman Bates have been modeled after him in some way, shape, or form, and his story of cannibalism. And he was a grave robber and famously like kept the skin of his and body of his mother, which is where Norman Bates and Psycho story of his mom and attachment comes from. So it had the cauldron there, though, that he would boil body parts in and then skin them to make lamps or, robes or, that type of thing. It was the actual cauldron that he used to do this stuff in, which, again, the morbid curiosity that we have as a public to see that. And it's hard to fathom that those types of things happened with just an object you see sitting in front of you. But to think about, like, people were boiled in this after he cannibalized them.
Well, it's pretty amazing
tough.
because Ed Gein's story has kind of been lost to history because there's been so much
spin-off and lore around it.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, his story is nothing like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right.
It's a little bit like Psycho, but still not, and so, I mean, to see something that's from his real story is pretty impressive.
I feel like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre piece is the skin wearing and the skinning of, and I think the Norman's clearly the motherly attachment. But he would go and dig up corpses, and he'd use their skin for furniture around his house. The interesting thing about the set piece this was in, it was like a barn where he had done it because it was in kind of rural Wisconsin, right? I believe.
I think so. Somewhere up there. Somewhere up north, yes. I want to say Minnesota, but I could be wrong. I'll check.
I'm pretty sure it was Wisconsin.
I'll check on that.
You look while I'm doing that. But the interesting thing about the set that was in there, it was built by one of the set designers, if I recall, from Friday the 13th. And in the attic, they had like a body that was hanging. So it was bigger than the rest of the museum. It actually had an extended roof that opened up into the attic that they had converted into a barn. So it was really interesting in that sense. And they had some other artifacts of Ed Gein around there. But clearly the cauldron was kind of the most macabre outside of the skin that was in there.
You're right. Plainfield, Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
The Butcher of Plainfield.
Yep. His plaid shirt and crazy eyes and his hat.
If you want to read a good book of a character based on Ed Gein, read Child of God by Cormac McCarthy. It's just kind of this weird hick-like individual who's murderous but doesn't really understand his actions and the consequences of his actions, and it's a pretty good book.
Have you ever listened to our initial Creepcast episodes back, 10 years ago? I believe we actually went into that in a little more detail on one of those.
Oh, did we? Okay.
At some point. The next object I have is the Devil's Rocking Chair. So you might be familiar with that if you watch Conjuring 3. But it was a famous investigation from Ed and Lorraine Warren. And it was about the exorcism of David Gleitzel. He was a little boy said to be possessed by a demon. And they performed the exorcism on him. And the demon left the boy's body and entered that of another person in the room. And there's a chair that Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, and there was a guy later stabbed and killed by his landlord. But this chair was part of the exorcism, and it's in there. And the creepy thing about it is you got it in the wall, and they kind of open it up, and they have the room set up like they did at the time of the exorcism, but they play the tape of it. They kind of pause from their tour guide, and they're like, it's disturbing. They play the tape, and you hear the exorcism from Ed and Lorraine, the recording from it, which adds a lot of like creepy context. Because you can listen to that tape. I can listen to it at midnight, sitting here in my office. It's quiet. You start listening to it, and I get creeped out by that stuff when it's real. Tapes, recordings, whether or not it's real or not isn't what I'm getting at. It's just demonic sounding, and it's odd.
Well, sure, yeah,
and scary. And to hear it in that context with the actual chair that's sitting there is super creepy to me.
Well, the film that has disturbed me the most in my life is The Exorcist. I mean, that
absolutely.
is, that type of stuff.
To this day?
To this day.
Same.
I was so creeped out by that movie. I watched it when I was 16.
So uneasy.
And
even now.
It was just, it was horrifying. And even if I don't think it's real, just watching it and hearing those sounds is pretty nerve-wracking.
Just the sounds alone. So one night I watched test footage of Linda Blair in her makeup. She's making like faces and stuff, but there's no audio. I turned out all the light. The lights were already out. I didn't do it because I was watching it. I was working on something on Downright Creepy, and I ran across it, probably something Exorcist related. I just watched the test footage. It's like 30 seconds of her making faces, and it's so uneasy to this day. I know it's fake. I know it's makeup. Like in my mind and like hearing the sounds, and boy, oh boy.
It was
still
just-
has a big effect on me.
It was the right mix of makeup and realism.
Yeah.
There wasn't any CGI going on. There wasn't any. It was just grainy,
Special
gritty,
effects.
and it really had an impact on me as well. So
So yeah, the Devil's Rocking Chair. I think anything exorcism related is always scary. Because like everything else, you don't know if it's real, if it's psychological. Either way, it's creepy. I mentioned this in the beginning. The place where this takes place, the basement of it at one point was used for actual satanic rituals. So there was real sacrifices of humans that happened in the basement. History would tell us. And it was kind of a hidden thing. I think a law firm eventually took it over at some point. They would never go in the basement. The star, the Antichrist star, is still in the basement where the rituals took place. And kind of funny, for an extra fee, if you're a VIP, you can go and sit in the Devil's Rocking Chair. You can go in the basement of this by yourself. If you're on the regular tour, you can't. You just hear about it, which I desperately wanted to go down there, but I'm like, I didn't pay the extra fee.
do you
But
know
in
what the extra fee is?
I think it's like $20,
Okay,
something like that.
so
It's not bad.
$68 total for
And
one
with
person.
fees, you're probably like 72 or something.
Yeah,
It's a decent chunk of money.
for a museum, it is. That's a pretty big.
But I don't know. Like,
But it's a different kind of museum too.
if I were to
so-
go to it again, I might actually pay it because I've been through it once, and I would be curious. And
Yeah.
I think going through it with different people, even if you go through it multiple times, you get to experience it in different ways with different people. So I would try it and go down there. There's Bela Lugosi's mirror that's supposed to be haunted and was also the mirror was present during like a mob murder. So there was some more history around it, and if you stare into it, you're supposed to kind of get tranced or possibly cursed. That's not even on my list. I just mentioned it because it's part of the VIP tour. So the next item on the list, and one of the last ones I'm going to mention, is the Dybbuk box. I think a lot of horror fans will be familiar with that because it's been in a few movies, or the subject of a few movies. It's actually the original owner of this, or the second-hand owner of this, is from Missouri. I think it's Kirksville, if I recall. I could be wrong about that. I know it's in Missouri, a small town, which I thought was interesting because I did not know the history about that. But anyway, there's said to be a malicious spirit in this Dybbuk box. It's haunted, and it's kind of part of Jewish mythology. But yeah, it's said to house a demon contained within inside of it. They have it in a glass case with a wood box around it, and you can kind of see around it. And then they've also got extra windows up around it, glass. They have a Jewish prayer written around it to protect you as you look at it. It's a very quiet room. It's dark. It's kind of dimly lit with the focus being on the box. But they're said, if I recall, to be 12 different Dybbuk boxes, kind of the tree of life, if you will. And they have another one there that's slightly smaller off to the side called the Root of Evil. And it's shaped like a box, carved with roots that come out of the bottom. Equally scary, but not as big of a focus in here. So they have 2 of the Dybbuk boxes. I'm curious if Zach's ever going to try and collect them all, or if there's some in a museum that he'll never be able to touch. Nevertheless, it was eerie being in there.
The Dybbuk box.
Yes.
If you collect all of them, is it like the stones?
Thanos.
Does something like miraculous happen? And
I don't know. I would be curious if they've ever been in the same place before.
yeah, that'd be kind of scary.
I
You
would guess
unlock
they
an
haven't.
ancient portal or something, and
Probably. That's the
the
last
hell
thing we
priest
need.
comes out.
That is so. Another interesting fact, because I've saw some footage on this, is that rapper Post Malone has been through there. I guess he's friends with Zach, and he did a lights off tour with him at night, kind of an investigation. Might have been an episode, actually, now I'm thinking about it. But this is before they put an extra layer of protection around the box. So it was just the glass case, not the extra walls and prayer and all that around it. And apparently he had a pretty bad experience with it and had extremely bad luck for weeks after he encountered that box. Tire blowout on a plane that he was on during takeoff that almost wrecked. I think he also had like cuts or something on his face. Like he had a bad accident, but it was like several bad things that happened after he had contact with the box. So a little interesting note. If you want to look up more on that, go on YouTube and look up Post Malone Dybbuk box, and you'll see some videos on it. This is more of a notable, like a last piece. It's not really part of my list, but I thought that perhaps you would find interesting as well. They do have a serial killer room full of relics and artifacts from some of the most notorious serial killers that have lived. So like the glasses of Bundy, which is interesting because you got to think like he looked through these when he was like his sight and his vision of killing people. He looked through these glasses. There's a painting of Charles Manson that includes some of his ashes, his actual ashes. So you got Charles Manson essentially in the museum. I've heard of people doing paintings with blood mixed into paint of people. And I've never heard of ashes, though, being used in the paint. So that's kind of crazy to me that exists. John Wayne Gacy, there's paintings that he famously does in prison of clowns and himself and letters and notes. There's all kinds of things in this room. But just adjacent to this room is Jack Kevorkian's death van, which is where he would do and assist in over 130 assisted suicides. So he would go to people's houses, people that had cancer that just kind of were miserable, terminally ill people that were just ready. They'd rather take their own lives and have it in their control than an illness or something like that. Very controversial. Kevorkian did die in 2011. He lived in this van for periods of time in his life as well. It had kind of a makeshift medical table in the back of this white van. For a lot of time, people thought that this thing was gone and it was impounded. And Zach came across it and it matched the VIN number, and he bought it. And now it's in a room in the museum with some other artifacts and stuff, and quotes from patients that said Kevorkian helped them or why they were doing it. It's interesting.
Is Jack Kevorkian a serial killer?
By definition, probably. I think that's the moral dilemma, right?
Yeah, but the definition of a serial killer is someone who kills, cools down, stalks, kills again.
Well, and these are willing.
So I guess Kevorkian never went through the stalking phase, right?
Well, he's also not technically killing them.
Right.
He's assisting them. They're willing participants.
Right. And didn't he have something where they always had to push the button or something along that?
They did have a
button, but
they did have like a morphine drip, I think, that they could push. I also think, if I recall, they signed paperwork. Of some kind,
absolutely.
and it's it's there. I don't know, man. It's a interesting ethical and moral dilemma. Jack Kevorkian as a whole.
I'm okay with it. If it's a terminally ill individual that is suffering, we get into the right to die and all this stuff, but I'm okay with it. I really do. I think that if they're at that point, now how do you prove that is another thing altogether.
Well, some had recordings of them discussing it.
Right.
And I will say, it actually is done tastefully, the display. It's not morbid per se, other than the topic is. But they've got, like almost in memorandum of people in the room and photos and quotes from them. And so, I mean, it's, it is what it is. I think the fact it happened in a van is sketchy, and it looks sketchy because it's a white van. So that's the only part that's like a little weird. But yeah, it's 1968 Volkswagen van that was sitting in the museum.
So what do you think? So all these different things that are in the museum, most of them, or at least some of them, pertain to the paranormal. Now let's pretend, for the sake of this question, that the paranormal is not real.
Okay. And it's more of a sideshow.
What is the obsession with it? What is the obsession with creating things for the purpose of being uneasy or scared? If, let's say, none of it's real, why do we attribute these traits to dolls? Why do we attribute these things to Ouija boards? What is our obsession with attributing demonic forces to inanimate objects?
I feel like, well, first of all, that's more like poltergeist, right?
Right.
Like their attachment to objects. I think it's the same psychological process you go through with the unknown. We're curious about space. We're curious about depths of ocean that we have not explored and what could be in there. We're curious about those things because we don't know about them. And we will, at some point, learn more and more about them, right? Like, we won't be around, but at some point, aliens will probably be discovered, vice versa. I think it's the unknown is what we're so curious about. And those are different because they can be at some point proven if we want them to be. But it's kind of like religion. It's
Sure.
You can't see it, but you believe in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you do, maybe you don't. No matter what you believe in, religion at its core is based on that you're putting trust in something that can't really be proven to some extent. Like most things. Like they're kind of stories and lore and history, but they're not necessarily proven to be that. We take it at its word, and I think there's a little bit of psychology in that when it comes to paranormal things. You're kind of like taking someone at their word unless you experience it yourself, which is why you can be skeptical of things.
The obsession with the unknown is a never-ending obsession, though.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Because as soon as it's known, we just find something else that's unknown, and we move to that. But we have to be thankful for it because it has brought about not only technological advances, but also great entertainment, like these ghost adventure shows and other things like that.
Well,
so
to be fair, like Ghost Hunters, for instance, and to some extent the other ones as well, Ghost Hunters will oftentimes have someone on staff, like at their investigation, to go do a historical check, especially in the newer shows. But they've always kind of done this. Ghost Adventures is, I feel like, more entertainment push base. They will try out some new equipment, some new ways to do it, whereas Ghost Hunters is very scientific based. And by that, I mean fact based. Like, they would rather test every possibility of what that was to make sure it's not practical. Like, why did that window close? Or why did this thing move? Is there air ducts? Was there a window open? Is there a draft? Like, why did that happen? And also, is there even historical nature of, like, there's a woman in white. All right, was there ever murder that happened? Was someone dressed in white killed? Like, I don't know. They'll research something. Was there kids that lived on the property that died in this well? Like, they'll figure out if there's something that happened and then check it against their investigation to maybe help further prove their point, versus some other ones that might be a little more whimsical and loosey-goosey about it. Not to say that stuff's not happening, but I just feel like when you can incorporate a history of something into a place, psychologically we think maybe it will happen or maybe it could have happened. But it's urban legend, right? It's history. It's mixing the two together and lore. And then before you know it, you've got paranormal. Right or wrong or fact or fiction, I don't know. But that's my 2 cents on it. And why I think we conjure these things up in our minds, whether they're real or not. So
definitely go check out the Haunted Museum, Las Vegas, Frodo Bagans.
Inferno Bagans. That'll be on Ghostober. Hey everybody, did you know that Downright Creepy is now part of the Fangoria family? What I mean by that is you can go to shop.fangoria.com/downrightcreepy and get 20% off your entire order. That also includes subscriptions and one-time orders. Enter the affiliate code Downright Creepy, all one word, all caps, and get 20% off at shop.fangoria.com/downrightcreepy. Let's switch gears really quick to end this. I want to talk about your escape room experience. We're getting upon the Halloween season. Of course, escape rooms happen all year round, but I feel like this one specifically would be great to check out in the fall season with some friends. Here in Kansas City, thebasementescaperoom.com to find out more about it. It's the basement and the study. Tell us about your experience at the escape room here in Kansas City.
So when you discuss an escape room, obviously you can't say too much because you don't want to ruin the secrets and take the fun out of the whole thing. But I will say that the basement and the study are based on the story of serial killer Edward Tandy.
Real or fictional?
He is a fictional serial killer. He has captured you, and he has put you in his basement, where you have to prove you are smart enough to escape. If you do escape, you of course escape. If you if you do not escape, in the basement, poisonous gas will seep into the basement, and killing you, and then he will eat you. He's a cannibal.
Okay, it's like a little bit of Ed Gein and H.H. Holmes murder house scenario.
This guy's a real jerk. But the dressing of the escape room is awesome. So talking about the basement, you start in a room with a bed, a television, and a bookshelf, and all of them come into play. You have to use the DVD player. It's really amazing. And then you progress into a computer room, eventually a bathroom, a kid's bedroom. It's all pretty amazing. The basement has, I think, 4 rooms total, and it's extremely difficult. Christina and I took 4 times to beat it.
Did you pay every time?
We paid every time.
Holy cow! Okay,
Yeah. So we went once. We'd get through a certain portion of it.
Sure.
And we try to remember what we did. Go back. Took us 4 times.
That's amazing.
The study's a little easier. So the storyline behind the study is you've escaped the basement, but just like a horror movie, you hear a sound outside. You don't run outside to escape. Of course, you run up the stairs and you go to the study. The study is more linear. The basement is a non-linear escape room where you can do things in different orders. The study, you have to do things in a certain order. You've escaped the basement. You run upstairs, and you have to escape before Edward comes home.
Okay,
And so it's more of he's angry now because you're actually in his home.
but the same character.
Same
There's
character.
a thread that's carried. Okay, that's interesting.
And
Okay.
the study has 3 rooms. It includes a study, of course, Edward's bedroom, and then his closet.
Interesting.
And it took...
is the closet really confined, or is it kind of a walk-in type? Just because I know it can handle up to 8 people per experience. So
It's pretty confined, but there's a
Okay.
secret there, but I can't
All right.
reveal it.
sure.
It took my wife and I 2 times to defeat the study.
Interesting.
But both escape rooms, really cool thing about this, they have live actors.
Yeah, I saw that. They have live performer. Is it the serial killer or like someone else trying to escape with you?
So
essentially?
in the
It's
basement...
kind of a guide, maybe.
It's in the basement. It is a person that has been handcuffed to the toilet in the bathroom, and once you get into the bathroom and you find out how to release this person, he will actually give you clues. He or she will give you clues on how to escape the rest of the escape room. In the study, it is Edward's blind, deaf housekeeper.
Oh, interesting.
Which is
that's interesting.
really cool. The actor that does that does an amazing job.
That's cool.
And again, he or she help kind of point you out if you're struggling. They'll give you hints. But he's
Sure.
blind and deaf, so he just kind of points at things, or he'll move over to something, and you kind of have to figure it out.
How do you know he's pointing at the right thing?
What's that?
He's blind and he's pointing at stuff, and you're like, you believe
Well,
him?
he's like feeling the walls, and
Go here, and you're
he'll
like,
kind of
okay.
edge towards something that you kind of
Yeah.
feel like, okay, we've been struggling for a while. He's trying to give us a hint.
Blind leading the blind. Okay.
But yeah, absolutely. So my wife and I have done several escape rooms. These 2 are the best we've ever done. We've done some in Kansas City, Colorado Springs, Branson. These are the 2 best we've ever done.
Tell me this.
Extremely fun.
Where are they located? Is it West Bottoms?
They were located at West Bottoms. They are moving, and they are expanding. They're moving to Crossroads,
Oh, that's great.
and they're expanding rooms. We'll see how that works out. I don't know. I'm excited to have more rooms, but West Bottoms has a very creepy vibe.
Yeah, West Bottoms, for those of you
So-
that don't know, that's where our haunted house district is, with the OGs, the Beast, the Edge of Hell, Macabre Cinema. And it's kind of a industrial, desolate area that was only really in the last 5 years kind of built up to where there's cool antique stores and First Fridays that take place down there. But the company that does these escape rooms, their home base is there. So not only are they building these for you to go through, they're also fabricating escape rooms that are purchased by other businesses. They will build them, test them there. They have test rooms to test certain things that employees can go in that maybe aren't working on it. I got a tour of it once because we were thinking about building an escape room for a client of mine. And they were working on a runaway train escape room that was like 2 or 3 passenger cars. And they were fabricating it, and then they'll ship it out, and it will be a standalone. So it's really cool. I was just curious if it was the same thing, and it sounds like it is. So from what I could tell, 45-minute experience time limit.
The time limit is 45 minutes,
Yeah.
and Just the attention to detail is amazing. You really become immersed in the whole thing, and I highly recommend it. Go check them out. I think they're in. I think actually today, if I'm not mistaken, today was the debut at Crossroads.
And
Absolutely. And you wanted me to give you grades on them.
yeah, out of 100%, what would you give the basement and the study?
The basement, I would give a 97%.
That's incredible.
I love it. The only downfall is that it is a little too difficult for a 45-minute time limit.
Gotcha.
But the poison gas actually seeps into the room if
Yeah.
you lose.
The fog.
Of course, it's not actually poisonous, but
Jeez, that's too bad.
yeah, it is really. The study, I'd give a 92%. It's not quite as detailed as the basement, but still pretty fun. Highly recommend. Go check out the basement and the study. And actually, they have some in LA as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a partnership there, I guess, or whatever. But
Or they built them
Yeah.
in there and fabricated them and sent them out.
so pretty interesting stuff.
Also, it could be up to 8 players. It is time slots, so you have to go on and reserve your time. What did you pay for this? Was it $80 a piece? Or $80 per group?
No, I'm not real sure, but my wife is a nurse. She gets a discount.
There's $10 discount for medical and military.
Yeah. So we got the discount there. I think we only paid $70-something total.
70
for
makes,
both of us.
70 makes sense because it's 80 on the site, and it was military and medical discounts $10 off if you show something.
So-
and you did this how many times?
4 for the basement, 2 for the study.
That was a lot of money, my friend.
Yeah, it was great.
I'm glad you defeated it.
Oh, I
It's been
know.
a big disappointment. If
But
you
then it's funny because as soon as we defeated it, the day we defeated the study, the guy said, "Hey,
Changed
we're moving and we're going to change everything." Oh, okay, cool.
Great,
so now
we'll be
we're
back.
Yep. Now we have more money to spend. So
That's cool. So if you're looking for an escape room and you're in the Kansas City area, check out basementescaperoom.com. And Crossroads District is in our downtown area. It's the art district just downtown from our entertainment districts, not too far away. They basically are attached. So check that out. Thanks for bringing that to our attention because it's almost Halloween season, and this has a very haunted attraction feel to it when you go to the website and see some of the video footage. There's even an FAQ that's like, is this a haunt? And they have to be like, no, it's not. But it is horror-based, very much so. So
let me ask you this as
Sure.
we close out. I'm not sure that we'll be able to do this again before Halloween. Hopefully
Yep.
we can, but if we can't, do you have any big plans for Halloween? What are you planning to do there?
Oh, man. It's kind of bittersweet because my wife is not into any of this. Like, even Spirit Halloween, she went once, and she's kind of like, I don't even want to be here now. She doesn't really watch horror films or anything like that. So, and I've got a 5-year-old. So if I'm going to do this, I definitely have to go with somebody else. That being said, I typically don't do much for Halloween. Like, there's so much I'd like to go do. Like, go stay a night in the Crescent Motel down in Eureka Springs. It's not that far away. Haunted hotel down there. I've been once, but I've never been able to stay in it. Haunted houses in St. Louis, the Darkness. I'd like to go there sometime just for the haunted houses. So there's a lot of things I'd like to go do. Ghost tours. I'd like to do an overnight 5-hour ghost tour somewhere. There's one in Jeff City and some in Kansas City. But I never get to go do them because I'm like, well, my wife's not going to go. I'm not going to go by myself to most of these things. So, yeah, I don't do that much. I see a lot of stuff, and I'm able to tell people about it and live vicariously through them. So
Well, let me know because the Kansas City stuff I'd probably be willing to do. I don't know if I'd travel to St. Louis for a haunted house.
it's pretty, it's 4 hours for us to get there ish.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, the
I've
Kansas City stuff
seen
that'd be fun.
the kind of lights on tour of it, and it kind of blows what we have here away
Really.
from a, yeah.
So my wife and I usually go to the haunted houses in West Bottoms.
Yeah.
The Beast, the Edge of Hell, and Macabre Cinema.
Macabre, yeah.
We went last year. Macabre Cinema was great.
Yeah, I've always liked it.
Beast, Edge of Hell, kind of disappointing. I don't think we'll be going back next year. We're talking about in a very much 180 going to Worlds of Fun.
Yeah, I was going to tell you, Halloween, like horror nights, basically, at Worlds of Fun. I think it's Halloweekends is what they call it officially. They just had their night for actors to go audition. So we're right on the cusp of that. I've been to Spirit Halloween 5 times already, 4 with my son, who likes to go and step on all the animatronics because he loves those things. So I guess he's got a little bit of dad in him there. But But yeah, Halloween weekends at Worlds of Fun, top notch. You get a lot of different kind of variety of haunts. They're not as big. Yeah, it's definitely worth it. I think maybe the best overall experience for a ticket price in Kansas City for haunted attraction based things. There's a couple I'm forgetting. Maybe we talk about it next time. But there's a couple other ones. There's an outdoor haunt here. There's Tonganoxie, Kansas has a haunted house, Zombie Toxic, I think, or something to that effect. And then Buried Alive is a smaller-ish haunt at the Kansas City Wine Company. It's kind of like a Weston pumpkin patch vibe during the day, but I think they've got that maybe at night. I don't know the extent of it. I just found out recently about it. So yeah, there's plenty of things to kind of check out and do around here. I've always thought that we could be better with our haunted attractions, though.
Well,
And that's only because we've been around for so long and kind of been an OG for haunted houses for 40 years that we just haven't progressed as much as other markets that are newer, right? So
my wife and I tried to plan a trip to Disneyland during Halloween season. Couldn't work with our schedules, but man,
Universal
they do some amazing stuff out there for Halloween.
Universal Halloween Horror Nights. Every year they change the theme. It's typically like modern day type stuff, but yeah, check that out. So as we approach the spooky season, just some more things to do in the area. We want to hear what you're doing, though. I love to see photos of other haunted houses and other areas. So hashtag Creepcast on Twitter and at Downright Creepy on all of our social media accounts. Let us know where you're going, what you're doing, because we'd love to check it out, maybe give some shout-outs to some of those haunted attractions in other areas.
And, of course, we're going to see Halloween Ends.
Of course. We'll talk about that on the show at some point. So hopefully our fall preview guide was helpful to you guys last time. We'll be talking about a few of those things and maybe even some of the Ghostober stuff. So until next time, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Creepcast.